It's Thursday, May 16, and this is your Barbados Today Evening News Update. So glad you can join us. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Government is looking at policies that would free up land for development in areas which had previously been restricted. And it is preparing to head to Parliament to make that happen through a new water zone, water protection and land use zoning policy. Minister of Energy and Water Resources, Wilfred Abrams, made the disclosure during a post-cabinet press conference today.
One of the features of our policy is that we no longer look at our water zoning in terms of the water table alone, but you also have to look at Barbados as one large coastal area, and the focus is now on prevention rather than cure. So we're now not just looking as to what do we do with the water when it comes to the aquifer if it is contaminated. The focus is now on stopping contamination from happening to the aquifers, to the water catchment areas, and also contamination in the coastal areas. So one of the spin-offs of this is some area is freed up for development. So as zone 1, which is the new zone A, you recover, or there's about 40% more land area that is not completely excluded from development. So there is restricted development, there's controlled development, but it is not completely excluded. We're not just looking at a blanket exclusion. We're practical. Barbados has a finite amount of land area, so we have to look at ways in which the land area can be used, if even used with conditions.
Barbados removes visa restrictions for several countries. Word of this from Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Dr. Jerome Walcott. Among some of the countries which no longer need visas are Cameroon, India, Monaco, Qatar, Thailand and Indonesia. Dr. Walcott says the visa restrictions made it difficult for some persons to visit the island. He made the comments during today's post-cabinet press conference at government headquarters.
You'll recall that during the election last year, in terms of a manifesto, we spoke about engaging the world. And in foreign affairs, this is what we've set out to achieve, recognizing that in the area of globalization and the issues within the world, it's a different world in terms of the interactions between countries, in terms of trade, and in terms of tourism. 3 weeks ago, as a result of this and moving in this direction, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs brought to Cabinet and was approved a paper for Barbados to establish relations with 30 countries from which we didn't have relations before. We recognize it is important for us to strengthen the relationship with the present countries with which we've been doing business for several years, and indeed to make new friends, so to speak, in the global world and to seek new opportunities. And in terms of Barbados, we depend on tourism, we depend on investment and opportunities for business. And in this regard, we recognize that in terms of travel, that the stipulations in terms of having visas are sometimes a deterrent for tourists and indeed persons who are seeking to establish business and interact with the country. They find it fairly complicated. In this regard, the Cabinet of Barbados today agreed to remove the requirements for visas for a number of countries in different parts of the world.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ryan Strawn, says government had no choice but to dissolve Resolution Life Assurance Company Limited. He made the comment as he addressed a Res Life Town Hall meeting at the Lloyders Kingsandiford Centre last night. Strawn told the packed meeting that contrary to some financial pundits, the decision to close the company was not a matter of trying to find the easiest way out, but to ensure investors got back some of their return on their investment without burdening taxpayers for generations to come.
As I indicated at the very beginning, the assets that was on the balance sheet with respect to Clicor/Res Life vis-a-vis the liabilities, meaning basically all of the claims for the persons in this room as well as potentially those in the Eastern Caribbean, significantly exceeded the actual amount of money or assets available to be able to balance that liability. And so what essentially had happened was that the government issued, the previous administration had issued $600 million in debt to plug that hole. And the reality is that as we came to office and we restructured the debt, the burden, the existing burden of financing that debt so that the company of itself would be solvent really did not make sense. Because as I said, if the company on its own couldn't manage its liabilities, the government itself, given our debt profile up until a year ago, was also insolvent. And therefore, it was impossible for the government to maintain payments under that arrangement and at the same time continue to put monies into the companies to keep it going.
Meantime, payments to policyholders and claimants of Raise Life will begin next month and conclude in August. Chief Executive Officer of the company, Cheryl Senhouse, outlined the eligibility criteria for the payout.
The Minister would have alluded to the fact that insurance is fairly complicated, and certainly as a company we would have inherited a very wide range of policies. So while the Ministry would have articulated a fairly high-level policy for the liquidation, we would have had to look at the details of the policies that we have on hand to determine which ones will be eligible for the settlement. So in terms of active policies, the primary criteria that we would have used would be if the policy was active as at the 31st of March 2019, and in addition to that, did the policy have a net positive cash value or a positive fund value? And this is important because some policyholders would have stop paying their policies and simply allow them to lapse. So the premium payments would have gone against the fund value, and as a result, at some point in time, the policy value would have gone to zero.
Changes are coming to the legal system in Barbados, which will facilitate alternative disputes resolution. Chief Justice Sir Marston Gibson made the announcement last night in his address to the closing ceremony of the two-day mediation sensitization workshop held at the Radisson Aquatica. Sir Marston said the changes include offering pro bono services to litigants who cannot afford mediation fees, as well as specialization of mediation services.
We are looking at doing specialist training. The mindset of the mediator who is dealing with a commercial matter is going to be entirely different from the mindset of the mediator who is mediating a family law matter. Two hard-nosed businessmen in a mediation who basically just want to know what the bottom line is. It's going to be very different than the situation where you have two parties who are both arguing that they want custody. And it may be that they're looking at the bottom line too, because whoever has custody of the children is the other party is going to have to pay maintenance for the child or children. But in any event, it's not going to be as emotion-free as a commercial mediation.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from our regional neighbors, we pick up in Trinidad, where officials are trying to determine what caused the hard landing of a national helicopter service craft over the Windy Hill area as it searched for 8 escaped prisoners. We get more in this report from TV6 News.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. The National Helicopter Services Limited and the TNT Civil Aviation Authority are at this time trying to determine what caused this NHS craft to have a hard landing in a Windy Hill farmer's melon plot. Mr. Suchet, whose mute, was bathing in a nearby river when he saw the helicopter plunge. He used his hands to tell us there were 3 persons on board whom he and 2 other residents rushed to help out of the battered chopper. Police Commissioner Gary Griffith confirmed he made the call to utilize the helicopter in the search exercise. Reports suggest the helicopter landed at the basketball court in Bonnet and took off with 3 persons, among them 1 prisons officer and the pilot.
Finally, on the international scene, President Donald Trump on Thursday proposed overhauling his country's immigration system with emphasis on young, educated, English-speaking applicants instead of people with family ties to Americans. The details of that story in this Reuters television report.
A new legal immigration system that attracts the best and brightest.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday outlined his long-awaited immigration overhaul plan. He's calling for heightened security along the border with Mexico and stricter limits on legal immigration.
Currently, 66% of legal immigrants come here on the basis of random chance. They're admitted solely because they have a relative in the United States.
Trump's plan, spearheaded by son-in-law Jared Kushner, would prioritize letting in people with advanced training and skills.
The biggest change we make is to increase the proportion of highly skilled immigration.
But critics on the right and left quickly pointed to what they said were major holes in the plan. Most notably, the plan does not address the recent surge in asylum seekers from Central America. Nearly 100,000 came in April alone. Those numbers are straining federal facilities like this one in McAllen, Texas, where Reuters photos taken this week showed migrants sleeping on the ground under makeshift awnings. The plan does not address the estimated 1 million immigrants brought illegally to the U.S. as children, known as Dreamers.
And that's news. But for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Good evening.